The storm rolled over the Hamptons like an angry ocean as Adrian Knight pushed open the door of his silent mansion and stepped into a darkness thick enough to feel on his skin the kind that swallowed sound and made even a man like him pause. The wind howled across the marble terrace behind him, and sheets of freezing rain followed him inside, before the door slammed shut on its own from the force of the gale. The entire estate was powerless. Every light was dead, except for a few flickering emergency strips along the floor that glowed faint blue beneath his shoes. Emergency mode activated earlier than he expected. His security system had never once gone down in 10 years. Tonight it had. That was the first sign something was wrong. The second was the soft patter of footsteps that did not belong to him. Adrian froze at the threshold of the living room, the soaked collar of his suit jacket sticking to his neck as he listened. 1 heartbeat, 2, then a sharp stumbling sound echoed from deeper inside the mansion. And after that came the quiet sob of a woman. Not loud, not dramatic. It sounded like the breath someone makes when the last of their strength is leaving their body. Adrian reached for the flashlight that hung near the wall panel and pressed the button. Nothing. Dead. The storm had taken everything. He exhaled once through his nose, and that tiny release of air was the closest thing he allowed himself to an emotional reaction. He walked through the dark with long, controlled steps, guided only by the dim security strips at his feet. A voice from the home AI flickered weakly through the intercom as he crossed the hallway. Unidentified human body detected in the kitchen. Temperature critically low. Possible distress. Adrian stopped, not because he was afraid. Adrian Knight never feared intruders, but because the tremble in the AI voice was something he had never heard. A malfunction in his own system was more concerning than any stranger wandering inside. He turned toward the kitchen and pushed the swinging door open just as a flash of lightning illuminated the room through the large glass windows. For a fraction of a second he saw her, and it was a sight that pinned him where he stood. A young woman crouched on the cold kitchen floor, drenched to the bone water pooling beneath her, like she had walked through the storm without even realizing it. Her hair hung around her face in tangled dark waves, and she held a thin gray blanket tightly to her chest, but the blanket was torn, soaked, and barely covered her trembling body. When the lightning died, she disappeared again into the darkness. Adrian switched on the emergency light above the counter, and a faint glow filled the room, just enough for him to see her eyes widen with panic. "Do not." Her voice broke on the word. "Please, do not turn the lights on." He stepped forward slowly. The dim security light grazed her skin, and that was when he noticed it. The bruises. Purple and blue shadows along her arms and shoulders, finger marks. The kind that came from someone holding her with violence. She drew the blanket tighter around herself and whispered with a tremor that hit him far harder than fear ever had. "I am naked. Please, do not look at me. Do not let him see me." Adrian did not move for a second, not because of her body, but because of the terror in her voice and the way she curled in on herself, like a wounded creature bracing for another blow. "Who is him?" Adrian asked, keeping his voice low and even. Before she could answer, a sudden flash of white light burst through the kitchen window. Headlights. A car pulled up outside the gate. She flinched violently, stumbling backward until her shoulder slammed against the cabinet. "He followed me." Her whisper shattered into panic. Oh God, he found me. The pounding came next. 3 heavy blows against the front door of the mansion that shook the frame of the house. A male voice bellowed through the storm. Emily, come out. Adrian narrowed his eyes. Emily. So that was her name. Her breath hitched when the voice roared again. You cannot hide from me, not tonight. Emily pushed herself farther into the corner until her back pressed against the cabinet doors, the blanket slipping down just enough for Adrian to see the full length of a bruise along her ribs. She gasped and pulled the blanket back up with shaking fingers, but the damage was seen. Not just the bruise, but the fear carved into her bones. Adrian took 1 step closer. She tried to move away, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed to her knees, barely catching herself with a trembling hand. She was ice cold. He could see it in the way her lips turned pale. She lifted her face toward him, soaked lashes clinging to her cheeks. If he gets in here, she whispered, he will kill you too. Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and something deep inside his chest shifted. Not sympathy, not pity, something older, something he thought had died long ago. He slipped off his jacket and knelt down so he was eye level with her. I am going to pick you up now, he said quietly. Do not be afraid. She shook her head fast, but he was already sliding an arm beneath her knees and another around her back. The blanket tightened between them as he lifted her from the cold floor. She weighed almost nothing. Her skin burned with cold against his chest. And when her head fell against his shoulder, he felt her whole body tremble uncontrollably. He adjusted his hold to keep her covered, but when his hand brushed her lower back, he felt something that made his jaw clench hard enough to ache. A massive bruise stretching up her spine. She sucked in a breath of pain, and he almost lost control. Not outwardly. Adrian Knight did not lash out, but something violent twisted in him. Her arms clung weakly to his neck as a thunderclap shook the house. The pounding at the front door grew louder. Emily buried her face against him and whispered again, with a voice so small it could barely escape her lips, Please, do not let him take me. Adrian held her closer, turned away from the window, and carried her out of the kitchen into the deeper dark of the mansion. The storm screamed outside, and the pounding at the door turned desperate. But Adrian ignored all of it. He focused only on the woman trembling in his arms. Her breath hitched as she whispered one last time, If he finds me. Her voice cracked. He will kill you too. Adrian carried Emily through the shadowed hallway as the storm raged against the walls of the mansion, like a living thing trying to claw its way. Inside, the sound of rain hitting the tall windows, echoing behind them as he tightened his grip around her trembling body. She curled closer to his chest instinctively, as if his warmth was the only anchor she had left in a world spinning out of control. He moved with steady, purposeful strides, heading toward the West Wing, where the power grid sometimes held longer during outages, but even there the lights were still dead, and the emergency strips pulsed a dim, uneven glow beneath their feet. Emily whispered something, but her voice was too faint for him to hear. He shifted her weight gently and lowered his head. What did you say? Her lips brushed his collar as she breathed out. Is he still outside? Adrian did not answer because the truth was pressing through the walls of the house. The pounding on the front door had stopped. The headlights had vanished from the window. Either the man was circling the property or waiting for a weakness to appear. Adrian pushed open the door to the guest suite with his shoulder and stepped inside, lowering Emily onto the long sofa near the cold fireplace. She shivered violently, even with the blanket pulled tight around her, and he felt a sharp strike of anger at whoever had done this to her. "Stay here," he said quietly, and she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength for someone so weak. "Do not leave me," she breathed. "Please." He paused, not accustomed to the sensation of someone depending on him. It hit him like a memory he had buried a long time ago. "I will be right in this room," he said. "I just need to check the cameras." That answer seemed to frighten her even more because her fingers tightened on his wrist and her eyes widened with panic. "Cameras," she whispered. "He knows how to break those." Adrian stilled. "How?" Emily breathed rapidly as she tried to explain. "He has people. They can hack things. They can track phones. They can trace calls. They know how to follow me even when I am hiding." Adrian dropped to a knee in front of her so she did not have to look up. "You are safe here." She shook her head hard. "You do not understand. They found me at a friend's apartment. They found me at the church. They even found me on the subway." He tilted his head slightly. "And yet you made it here." Her breath faltered as she looked at him like she did not fully believe he was real. "I did not know where I was running," she whispered. "I just ran." Adrian placed a hand on the blanket near her elbow, careful not to touch her skin directly. "Rest. I will check each entrance." Emily nodded slowly, but her terror stayed in her eyes like a permanent shadow. Adrian rose and walked to the wall panel near the door. The emergency system flickered back on for a moment and displayed a grainy feed of the exterior cameras. Heavy rain blurred the view, but he could still make out the outline of tire tracks in the mud near the gate. He selected the street camera and the feed zoomed in. A black SUV idled near the edge of the drive earlier that night. A man stepped out, tall, expensive coat, confident walk. He looked up directly into the camera with a smirk, as if he wanted to be seen. Then the feed cut to static. Adrian stared at the frozen screen, his jaw tightening. He recognized the type. Someone drunk on power. Someone who had never heard the word no. Someone who believed the world belonged to him. He turned back toward Emily, who watched him with wide, frightened eyes. "You know him?" Adrian asked. She swallowed. "Yes, he is the reason I am here." Her voice broke. "He will not stop." Adrian walked toward her and sat on the edge of a chair across from her. "Tell me what happened." She hesitated, then shook her head. "You will not believe me." "Try me," he said. His tone was steady, but something dark flickered behind it, like a fuse waiting to be lit. Emily pulled the blanket tighter around herself and stared at the floor. "He is dangerous. His family is powerful. They can make anything disappear. They can make people disappear." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "Did they hurt you?" Emily pressed her lips together, as if holding back a sob. "They tried to bring me in for a mental evaluation. They said I was unstable, that I needed treatment, that I was not thinking clearly." Adrian frowned. "On whose authority?" Emily hesitated. "A police officer, a doctor. They had papers, signed forms. They said I was a danger to myself." Adrian understood immediately. An involuntary psychiatric hold, a weapon in the wrong hands. "They tried to take you against your will," he said. She nodded, and tears finally spilled onto her cheeks. "They wanted to lock me up. He wanted to lock me up. He said it was for my own good." But he smiled when he said it. Adrian felt an unfamiliar heat in his chest. That was not anger, not exactly, but something sharper and colder. Something that made him want to destroy whatever had put that terror in her eyes. He stood and walked to the console table where he kept a dry towel. When he returned, he knelt again and began gently blotting the rainwater from her hair. She stiffened at first, but slowly her shoulders relaxed under his careful movements. "You are freezing," he said. She nodded. "I was outside for too long." Adrian reached for his spare shirt draped over a nearby chair and handed it to her. "Put this on." She stared at the shirt like it was a lifeline, but she hesitated, cheeks flushing. "Turn around," she whispered. "Please." Adrian turned his back without question and listened to the soft rustle of wet fabric and the faint tremble of her breath as she changed. When she finished, she whispered a shaky, "Thank you." Adrian faced her again. The shirt was far too large on her, hanging off one shoulder, and she hugged it closed with her hands. She looked small, fragile, yet there was a stubborn fire beneath her fear. A knock thundered through the house. Adrian moved instantly, stepping between her and the door as she gasped. It was not the front door this time. It was the side entrance near the garden. A voice called out through the wind. "Police! Open up!" Emily shot to her feet, panic exploding across her face. "No, no, please, they are with him." Adrian held up a hand. "Stay here." He walked to the hallway and opened the side window, just enough to speak. 2 officers stood outside, soaked from the rain. "Sir," one said, "we have reason to believe a missing woman may have entered your property. She is considered unstable and in danger of harming herself. We need to search the residence." Adrian stared at them with the coldest eyes he possessed. "You have no warrant and no right to enter my home." The officer stiffened. "Sir, this is a safety check." Adrian shut the window firmly. When he turned back, Emily was standing behind him, gripping the edge of the blanket and trembling. "They said those exact words earlier," she whispered. "They are not here to help me." Adrian walked back to her and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No one is taking you anywhere, not without going through me." Her breath shook as she looked up at him. "Why are you helping me? You do not even know me." Adrian held her gaze. "Because something about you tells me you have not been helped by anyone in a very long time. And that ends tonight." Emily pressed a hand to her mouth as tears spilled over. She stepped closer without thinking and barely brushed her forehead against his chest. For a moment, Adrian did not move. Then slowly he rested a hand on the back of her head in a gesture so gentle it surprised even him. The storm slammed against the windows once more, but inside the mansion, something quiet began to settle between them. Something fragile, something dangerous, something undeniable. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa with Adrian's oversized shirt, wrapped tightly around her as if it were armor. Her knees drawn up, her fingers twisted in the fabric, while the storm rattled the windows like a warning she could not ignore. Adrian stayed close, but not too close, giving her space, though his presence filled the entire room with a steady strength she had never known before. He waited without a single word, letting her breathe, letting her decide when she was ready. Finally, she lifted her eyes, still red from fear and exhaustion. "You said you wanted to know why I ran," she whispered. Adrian nodded once. "Tell me everything." She swallowed hard, and her voice trembled like she was stepping into a memory she wished she could burn out of existence. "His name is Trevor Hale." Adrian recognized the name instantly. A political golden boy, son of a legacy family, photographed on charity stages and magazine covers. Someone the public adored, someone who built an entire persona on being perfect. Emily let out a small bitter laugh. Everyone thinks he is a savior. Everyone thinks he is gentle, kind, devoted to helping others. They do not see the truth. Adrian did not interrupt. He knew when someone needed to let the dam break slowly. I met him at a charity event 2 years ago, she continued. He sponsored the program I worked for, teaching kids from low-income neighborhoods. He acted interested in helping. He kept showing up, bringing supplies, taking pictures with the kids. At first, I thought he meant well, that he was different from the other wealthy donors who only cared about the spotlight, but he wanted something from me. She pulled the blanket higher on her shoulder as if trying to hide from the memory. He started showing up everywhere, outside the school, near my apartment, at the coffee shop, always smiling, always polite. But it felt wrong, like he had memorized my schedule, like he was studying me. Adrian watched the way her hands started to shake again. Did you tell anyone? Yes. My supervisor said I should be grateful for his attention, that donors like him keep the program alive. Emily closed her eyes. I tried to avoid him, but he made it impossible. He pushed harder. He wanted to control everything, what I wore, where I went, who I spoke to. Adrian felt something cold coil inside him. And when you said no, Emily's voice dropped until it was barely sound. He changed. One night he came to my apartment unannounced. He had a key. I still do not know how he got it. He said we were meant to be together, that his family approved, that he could give me a life I never dreamed of. When I told him I did not want that future, he slapped me. Not hard enough to leave a mark that night, but hard enough that I knew what he was capable of. Adrian's hands curled slowly at his sides, though his voice stayed level. Why not go to the police? I did, twice. They told me there was no evidence. They said he was respected. They said maybe I misread things. Emily's breath hitched and she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I found something, months later, something I was never meant to see. Papers, documents, numbers that did not add up, a financial trail hidden inside his so-called charity projects. I brought it to a journalist, a real investigative reporter. He promised to protect me. Adrian exhaled slowly. And that was when Trevor turned on you. Emily nodded. He found out. I do not know how, but he did. The reporter stopped replying. His article never came out. And then Trevor confronted me. He said he would ruin me, said I was unstable, that he would have doctors declare I was a danger to myself, that he could put me in a facility where no one would ever hear from me again. Adrian could imagine it perfectly. Wealth, power, influence, the ability to silence anyone who threatened the illusion. The storm pounded the windows again, and Emily flinched. A few days later, she whispered 2 officers showed up at my work. They said I needed to come with them for an evaluation, that someone filed a request, that I was having episodes. I tried to tell them Trevor was behind it, but they insisted I needed help. Adrian leaned closer. Did you go with them? I had no choice, she said. They took me to a private clinic. Trevor was waiting there. He said I should stop fighting, that if I stayed a few months, no one would question my release, that his family would make sure the world saw me as fragile instead of dangerous. Her voice cracked as she whispered. He smiled while he said it. He said he was doing me a favor. Adrian felt the anger rise again, a slow burning heat that crawled beneath his ribs. How did you get out? Emily looked down at her bare feet like she was ashamed. A nurse helped me. She said she saw too many women brought in by men with money and power. She told me to run. She led me through the service exit during shift change. She gave me a coat and told me not to stop. Emily shook her head, but I did stop. I stopped to breathe under a bridge, and they found me. I had to leave everything behind, my phone, my bag. My clothes were torn when I fell trying to climb a fence. I thought if I could just keep moving, they would lose my trail. Her voice trembled, but they did not. They chased me in that black SUV for miles. I ran through the woods because it was the only place without cameras. The rain started, and I thought I would freeze before they caught me. Then I saw your house through the trees. I did not know who you were. I did not know if you would help me. But I had nowhere left to go. Adrian moved closer and sat beside her without touching her. You chose the right house, he said quietly. Emily looked at him with eyes full of exhaustion and disbelief. Why would you help me when no one else did? Adrian let the silence stretch before answering. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything and have no one believe you. And because you are not safe out there. Not tonight. Not until this ends. Emily pressed a shaking hand to her chest, as if reminding herself she was still alive. Then she whispered, You think I can survive this? Adrian met her eyes. I think you already have. The storm outside began to ease into a steady rhythm, but inside the mansion, the air felt charged with something heavier than thunder. As Adrian watched Emily, sitting curled under the blanket, her fingers still trembling, though she tried to hide it, he recognized that tremble, not because he had ever lived her nightmare, but because he had once seen someone else shake like that, while pretending they were fine. Someone he never saved, someone who still haunted him in the hours when sleep refused to come. He inhaled slowly as he sank into the chair across from her, giving himself a moment to steady the violent memory threatening to rise. Emily sat quietly, her knees drawn close, her eyes fixed on the floor, like she was afraid to look up and face whatever came next. Adrian studied her the way he studied every problem he had ever solved in his life. Except this time it was not code or markets or hostile takeovers. This time it was a woman who had lost everything and still somehow found the strength to run through a storm for her own freedom. Emily, he said quietly, and her eyes flickered up at him. You are safe for now, but you need warmth, food, rest. You cannot outrun anything if your body collapses. She nodded slowly, though her voice trembled when she answered. I know, I just cannot stop hearing his voice. Adrian stood and crossed the room to the small bar tucked against the wall. Not for alcohol, but for the kettle he kept there for late nights. When he forced his mind to keep working long after it should have shut down, he filled it with filtered water and set it to heat. The silence stretched, but it was not empty. It was full, thick, heavy. Emily's eyes followed his movements like she was trying to memorize every sound that was not threatening, every soft click of the kettle, every slow breath he took. When the steam started to rise, he poured warm water into a cup with ginger and honey. It was not much, but it was grounding. He brought it to her carefully, and she looked at it as if she did not deserve even this small kindness. Drink, he said. Your body is in shock, and this will help. She wrapped both hands around the cup, her small fingers shivering against the heat. Thank you, she whispered. The gratitude in her voice cut deeper than any blade. He sat on the armrest of the sofa, but kept enough distance not to overwhelm her. How long have you been running? She exhaled, Days. I have not eaten since yesterday morning." Adrian nodded once and stood again, disappearing into the kitchen to grab the ready-to-eat meal packs he always kept for emergencies. He heated one, plated it, and returned. Emily looked at the food but did not reach for it. "I do not want to take from you," she said softly. Adrian gave her a look so steady it almost rooted her in place. "Survival is not stealing. Eat." She lifted a fork with unsteady fingers and took a small bite. As she swallowed, her eyes filled with sudden tears. "It tastes like food," she whispered. "I forgot what warm food tasted like." Adrian's chest tightened, but he did not let emotion show on his face. He only nodded and let her eat in silence. Thunder rolled again, and she flinched. He noticed. She tried to hide the tremor. He noticed that too. When she finished half the plate, she set the rest aside like she was embarrassed to keep going. Adrian leaned forward slightly. "You need all of it." Emily shook her head. "I cannot eat too fast. My stomach might reject it." He understood. Trauma reshapes the body as much as the mind. He sat back in silence until she looked at him with a small, hesitant question in her eyes. "Why are you like this?" "Like what?" he asked. "Kind," she whispered. "You do not even know me." Adrian held her gaze. "Kind is not the word most people use for me." Emily searched his face as if trying to read something written between the lines of his expression. "You feel things," she said quietly, "even if you pretend you do not." Adrian looked away for the first time since she began speaking. He never allowed cracks in his armor. Not for the world, not for anyone. But somehow this woman, who had lost everything, saw straight through him. Years ago, he said, after a long pause, "Someone I cared for deeply died because of a choice I made." Emily's breath caught. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to bring up pain." Adrian shook his head slowly. "It is not your fault. She was sick. I thought I could handle it alone. I thought she was fine because she kept telling me she was. And when I finally realized how bad it was, she was gone." Emily's expression softened. "You blame yourself." "Every day," he answered simply. Emily leaned closer, almost unconsciously, as if something in his honesty pulled her like gravity. "Losing someone you love," she whispered slowly, "changes you." Adrian turned his eyes to her then, a deep, raw look she had not seen before. "And what did it change in you?" Her breath trembled. "Everything. I lost trust. I lost safety. I lost my voice. My life did not belong to me anymore. I became something he could use, something he could bend. And I kept thinking if I stayed quiet, it would keep me safe. But it only made him stronger." Adrian's jaw tightened. Silent people are easy to overthrow. Emily nodded. "I learned that too late." Adrian leaned forward, resting his arms on his legs. "And now," she blinked, "now you are here, in my house, still breathing, still fighting, still choosing yourself, even when the world turned against you. That makes you strong." Emily stared at him with wide eyes that shimmered like the storm reflected in water. "I do not feel strong." "You will," he said with a quiet certainty that stole her breath. She looked down at her hands. "You talk like you know what comes next." Adrian studied her a moment. "Because I do. You are not alone anymore." Emily pressed her lips together, and her voice broke when she whispered, "Adrian, I do not know what to do." He reached out slowly and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Then, for the first time in years, he let himself feel the fragile weight of another human being. "You breathe, you rest, and tomorrow we fight." She looked up at him through her wet lashes. "You would fight for me." Adrian never hesitated. "I already am." Emily woke to the soft vibration of her phone on the table beside her, even though she had not owned a phone in days, and Adrian had not given her one. Her heart stuttered as she pushed herself upright on the sofa, still wrapped in the blanket and wearing his shirt. Adrian stood near the large desk by the window, the glow from the backup generator illuminating his face in sharp lines that made him look like he was carved from cold stone. He held a sleek device in his hand, not a phone, but a satellite tablet, and his eyes were locked on the screen with a concentration that made her chest tighten. "You need to see this," he said quietly. His tone was too calm, too measured. That meant danger, real danger. Emily pushed the blanket aside and crossed the room, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. "What is it?" Adrian turned the screen toward her, and Emily felt the ground shift beneath her. Her face was everywhere. Dozens of articles, news alerts, social media threads piled with comments. Missing woman Emily Carter, last seen fleeing from a facility. Emily Carter unstable. Emily Carter under psychiatric concern. A thread on a major gossip page read, "Trevor Hale seeks help. Locating beloved girlfriend suffering mental decline." Emily's breath caught painfully. "He is using the media." Adrian nodded once. "And he is good at it. He has money connections and public sympathy. He built an entire narrative while you were hiding in the woods." She covered her mouth as the headlines blurred in her vision. The worst part was the comments. Strangers who had never met her were calling her dangerous, delusional, manipulative, a liar, running from treatment. And beneath all of that, Trevor's face appeared in interview clips, crafted in perfect sympathy lighting. He spoke softly about worry and heartbreak and how much he wanted her home. Emily felt like she was floating outside her own body. "None of this is real," she whispered. "None of this is true." Adrian lowered the tablet and stepped closer. "He is rewriting your life in real time." She shook her head in disbelief as tears pressed behind her eyes. Why would anyone believe him? Adrian's jaw tightened. Because he crafted a brand, a clean political image, a golden reputation. And you are one woman with no resources and no one to defend you. He knows exactly how to manipulate public perception. Emily wanted to scream, but her voice only cracked. "This is how he wins. People will think I am insane." Adrian placed the tablet on the counter and crossed his arms as he studied her. "They will until they see the evidence," he said. "And we are going to show them." Emily stared at him, stunned. "Evidence? You mean the documents I found? Except I do not have them anymore. They were taken." Adrian's eyes darkened. Not all of it. His tone had a satisfaction that startled her. "While you slept, I pulled data from public filings and private satellites. I accessed the charity's financial network. I traced his transactions. His money trail is not as clean as he thinks." Emily felt something spark in her chest for the first time in days. "Hope." He continued scanning through encrypted files. "The numbers do not lie, and his story is already cracking." But before she could respond, a loud digital tone pierced the room. Emily flinched. Adrian snapped up the tablet. "Someone is trying to breach the external security grid." Emily's pulse raced. "He found us." Adrian shook his head sharply. Not him. A surveillance drone, probably operated by his private security contractor. Emily turned toward the window, just in time to see a small red light glide past outside. She pressed back instinctively, and Adrian moved in front of her, shielding her body with his own. "Stay away from the glass," he ordered. Emily's breathing quickened as she peeked around his arm. "They are hunting me online," she whispered. and now physically too. Adrian kept his eyes on the drone that hovered briefly before floating upward and disappearing into the storm-thinned clouds. "They are searching the entire region," he said. "They will assume you went somewhere isolated to hide." "And they assume correctly," she whispered. Adrian turned to face her fully. "They have no idea you are with me." Emily felt the weight of that, the danger he had taken on, the risk he had chosen without hesitation. Adrian moved back to the central console and began typing rapidly. The lines of code reflected off his eyes like flickering light. "They are not just hunting you," he said. "They are erasing the truth." Emily stepped closer, listening with a mixture of fear and something far more complicated. "The reporter you trusted," Adrian said. "He did not disappear by accident. They got to him. He published a piece this morning claiming you fabricated everything." Emily's knees weakened. "He said he would help me." Adrian exhaled sharply. "He sold you out, or they pressured him. But the moment he turned his back on you, Trevor seized control of the narrative." Emily's voice broke. "So I am completely alone." Adrian turned from the console so fast she startled. "No," he said firmly. "You are not alone, not anymore." He looked at her in a way that made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in years. "As long as you are under my roof, no one touches you. Not him, not anyone." Emily swallowed hard. "Why are you doing all this? You do not even know me." Adrian held her gaze. "I know enough. I know you are telling the truth. I know you ran because you had no choice. I know you are stronger than you realize. And I know I am not letting a man like him decide your fate." Her chest ached with emotion she did not expect to feel so quickly. Trust, safety, the beginning of something she could not name. But the moment softened by something else entirely when she looked at the window and whispered in a shaken breath, "There is someone outside." Adrian whipped his head toward the silhouette, moving near the hedge line. A figure in dark clothing, a camera. Adrian uttered a quiet curse. They found the property. Emily backed away, trembling. "What do we do?" Adrian stepped forward, his voice turning sharp and commanding. "We do not panic, and we do not let them in." He pressed a button on the security panel, but when nothing happened, a realization cut through him like ice. The system has been tampered with. Emily pressed a hand to her chest. "They hacked your house." Adrian grabbed a compact security tablet and scanned the perimeter feeds. "The tampering is external, a remote breach. Someone is trying to blind us." Emily felt the world tilt as another flash lit up the window. A second camera, a third. They were circling, searching, hunting. Her breath caught. "Adrian, they want to record me. They want proof I am here." Adrian placed a steadying hand on her back and lowered his voice to a calm, steady rumble. "They will not get it. Not tonight, not ever." And for the first time, she believed him. The moment Adrian said they will not get it. The lights in the mansion flickered once, then died, completely plunging the entire house into a darkness so absolute, Emily felt it swallow her breath. The storm outside roared louder, as if sensing the shift, and the sudden silence inside felt unnaturally sharp, like the world was holding its breath. Adrian reached out instantly, and his hand found the small of her back, guiding her behind him. "Stay close," he murmured. "Do not move unless I move." Emily nodded, even though he could not see her, her fingers clutching his shirt as she tried to quiet the trembling in her knees. A faint sound echoed through the hall, a clink, metal, then another. Adrian exhaled slowly. "They are cutting the backup power at the source." How? Emily whispered, her voice cracking. Adrian lowered his tone until it vibrated like thunder trapped inside his chest. They came prepared. Another sound cut through the dark. A distant crunch of gravel, footsteps outside circling the mansion. Emily pressed herself closer to him, her breath shaking as she whispered, "Are they coming inside?" "They will try," he answered, "but they will have to get through me first." Before she could speak, a loud crack shattered the silence. Glass breaking somewhere deeper in the house. Emily gasped, and Adrian immediately pulled her toward him, shielding her with his arm. "They breached a window," he said. "Probably the one near the wine cellar. That is the quietest entry point." Emily's heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. "What do we do?" Adrian turned his head slightly, listening with the precision of someone who lived years in high-pressure environments. He counted the footsteps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Then he whispered, "Panic room, now." He grabbed her hand firmly and led her through the dark halls using muscle memory and the faintest outlines of the mansion's architecture. Emily tripped once, and he caught her waist, pulling her upright before she fell. His voice was barely audible. "Stay with me, just stay with me." Another crash echoed behind them. Someone knocking over a chair. Then a muffled voice, "Spread out, find her." Emily felt her stomach twist violently. That voice, she had heard it before, not Trevor, but one of his men, the one with the cold eyes who held her arms down the night they tried to force her into the clinic. Her breathing hitched and she stumbled again. Adrian stopped and cupped the back of her head, pressing her forehead lightly against his chest. "Breathe," he whispered. "With me. In, out." She tried, she failed, she tried again. His hand steadied her until she found a rhythm that did not feel like drowning. Another bang echoed through the house. "They are trying the office door," Adrian murmured. "Someone else is checking the kitchen. They are dividing. That gives us time." He moved again with swift, unwavering steps, leading her through the hallway toward the hidden panel that concealed the panic room entrance. But before they could reach it, a sudden beam of light sliced through the dark from the direction of the living room. A flashlight. Adrian reacted instantly, pulling Emily behind a marble pillar. Voices followed. "Check upstairs, check the east wing." Her breath trembled so hard, she feared they would hear it. Adrian leaned in, close his lips near her ear. "Quiet." She nodded, pressing a hand to her mouth. Footsteps moved deeper into the mansion, and Adrian waited until the sound faded before gripping her hand again and pulling her toward the wall panel. He pressed a sequence on the smooth surface, and the hidden door slid open with a faint mechanical hum. Inside was a narrow room with reinforced steel walls, dim emergency lighting, and monitoring screens that were currently blank due to the power cut. Adrian pulled Emily inside, and the door slid shut behind them, sealing out the noise of the intruders. Emily leaned against the wall, shaking. "They are here," she whispered. "They are in your house." Adrian stepped close, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Yes, and they will not leave with you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Adrian, they will kill you." Adrian looked at her in the dim light, and something unguarded flickered in his expression. "Then I fight harder," he said simply. She pressed both hands to her face, trying to force down the panic. "They will tear your house apart. They will find this room." Adrian's jaw tightened. "They might, but I have one advantage they do not." "What advantage?" "You," he said. "You survived him. You know how he thinks." Emily looked at him, confused and terrified. That is not an advantage. That is trauma. Adrian stepped even closer until their foreheads nearly touched. And trauma teaches you exactly what a monster is capable of. That is knowledge. Knowledge can save your life. Emily stared into his eyes, letting his steadiness anchor her. But the moment cracked when a loud metallic bang slammed against the panic room door. Emily choked on a cry. They found us. Adrian moved instantly, putting himself between her and the door. Not yet, he said quietly. They are testing it. They do not know what it is. Another bang, then a voice, deep, cold, the one she feared. She is in here. Emily's legs buckled, but Adrian caught her waist, holding her upright. Look at me, he whispered. Look at me. She lifted her tear-filled eyes. I will not let them take you, he said with fierce conviction. Not alive, not dead, not ever. But she felt her knees shake uncontrollably. Adrian tightened his hold. Listen to me. You are not a victim anymore. You are not alone. The door shook again. Harder. They found crowbars, Emily whispered in horror. Adrian pulled her toward the corner, pushing her gently to the floor behind a steel support column. Stay low. Cover your head. She shook her head wildly. Do not leave me. Adrian crouched in front of her, gripping both her hands. I am not leaving. I am positioning. I need to stand between you and that door. Her tears spilled again, but she nodded, trembling. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek with a gentleness that contradicted the violent tension in his shoulders. You survive, he whispered. That is all you do. Survive until I say move. She squeezed his hand as if memorizing the feel of it. Then he turned and faced the door. The metal creaked, buckled. Then with a final screech, the panel ripped open just enough for a figure to shove through the gap. A tall man in black clothes. Emily recognized him instantly. Cold eyes. He stepped inside, scanning the room. When he saw her, he smiled. There you are. Emily's breath seized, but before the man could take another step, Adrian charged. It did not look like a billionaire defending his home. It looked like a force of nature. Adrian slammed the man against the wall with brutal precision. The flashlight clattered to the floor. The intruder swung back, but Adrian blocked the strike, twisting his arm until a crack echoed through the room. The man howled in pain. A second intruder forced the door wider and lunged toward Emily. Adrian moved faster than she thought possible, throwing the first man to the ground and intercepting the second with a blow to the throat that sent him staggering. Emily pressed against the wall, covering her mouth to keep from screaming. Adrian grabbed the second attacker by the collar and slammed him into the steel wall. Then Cold Eyes rose again, grabbing a crowbar. Emily's voice cracked. Adrian, behind you. Adrian turned just in time, catching the crowbar with both hands. The force made him grunt, but he twisted, pulling the man forward and driving a fist into his jaw. The crowbar hit the floor. Adrian kicked it out of reach. Then suddenly sirens wailed outside the mansion, loud, sharp, flooding the air with blue and red light from outside the panic room. Federal agents, Adrian growled. Emily blinked. What? He caught his breath, leaning against the wall. I triggered the silent distress signal the moment we entered this room. Emily stared at him in disbelief. You knew they would come. Adrian met her eyes. I hoped. Footsteps thundered through the mansion. Shouts from law enforcement ordering the intruders to stand down. Cold Eyes tried to push up again, but agents swarmed through the open panel guns drawn, pinning both men to the floor. Emily covered her trembling mouth as one agent approached Adrian. Sir, the perimeter is secure. We got your alert. Adrian nodded, but his eyes were already on Emily. She slid down the wall, shaking uncontrollably as the adrenaline drained from her body. Adrian rushed to her, dropping to his knees and pulling her into his arms. "I have you," he whispered. "It is over. You are safe." She clung to him, sobbing into his chest as the storm quieted at last, and in that moment she knew she had never felt safer in her entire life. Emily sat wrapped in a blanket on the edge of Adrian's leather sofa, still shaking from the invasion as the federal agents finished sweeping the mansion, their voices echoing faintly through the halls. The storm had finally passed, leaving a cold dawn settling over the ocean beyond the windows. The air smelled of rain metal and adrenaline. Adrian stood across from her, rolling up the sleeves of his shirt. His jaw set tight as he leaned over the table where his laptop and satellite terminal flickered back to life under emergency power. The agents had taken the two attackers into custody and secured the perimeter, but he knew better than to relax. This was not over. Emily watched him with wide eyes still brimming with shock. Her voice was barely audible. "They came into your home. They could have killed you." Adrian kept typing but glanced up at her. "They failed. And they will keep failing." Emily shivered and pulled the blanket tighter. Adrian noticed and crossed the room, slowly placing a warm cup of tea in her hands. "Drink this." She nodded and took a small sip, her eyes never leaving his face. Adrian returned to the table, his fingers flying across the keyboard. She watched the lines of code scroll rapidly and swallowed. "What are you doing now?" Adrian did not look away from the screen, following the money. Emily blinked. "Money? You mean his charity accounts?" His lips curved into something that was not a smile, something darker. "His charity accounts are the smallest piece of this." Emily set the cup down carefully. "What does that mean?" Adrian turned the screen toward her. It showed dozens of accounts from banks across different states, then international accounts, transfers, shell companies, numbers that made no sense to her except for their scale. "Trevor Hale is running a laundering scheme through the Hale Family Foundation," Adrian said. "All of those charity galas he organizes, the fundraisers for children, the scholarships, they are not real, they are fronts." She stared at the screen, stunned. "I knew he was corrupt, but this is millions." Adrian nodded. "Millions that he funnels into political favors, real estate, offshore accounts." He clicked another tab. "And this is the ledger you were never meant to see." Emily leaned closer, and her breath hitched. She recognized the structure. Not the exact files, but the pattern. The secret ledger she found months ago before Trevor stole it from her. The hidden log of payments, the coded donations, the kickbacks disguised as educational grants. But this time the numbers were bigger, more brazen, and more connected than she ever imagined. Adrian spoke quietly. "You found the tip of the iceberg, and instead of dealing with the crime, he tried to remove the witness." Emily pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. "He wanted to hide all this." Adrian nodded. "And without your documents, the police would never listen. But they will listen to me." Emily looked up, surprised. "You think they will believe you?" Adrian leaned back in his chair. "I can create a full financial trace. Every illegal transaction, every false charity claim, every offshore funnel." He turned to face her completely. "And I have enough influence to force federal oversight." Emily felt tears sting her eyes. "You really believe me?" Adrian held her gaze with quiet certainty. "Yes," without hesitation. Her throat tightened. No one has believed me in so long." Adrian rose and crossed the room toward her. He sat beside her but not too close, giving her space to breathe. He studied her face for a long moment. "I do not trust easily," he said, "but I trust truth when I see it, and I see it in you." Emily looked down at her hands trembling in her lap. Everything he has done, everything he twisted, all of it was to protect this. She pointed weakly toward the screen. Adrian nodded. "He feared you, not because you were unstable, not because you were fragile, but because you saw something he desperately needed to stay hidden, and that makes you dangerous to him." Emily felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not weakness, something else, strength. Adrian noticed the change in her eyes and spoke quietly. "There is more." Her breath caught. "More." Adrian tapped a few keys and another file opened. A passport, a plane itinerary, offshore account access logs. This is the proof he is planning to flee the country in the next 72 hours. He will take 15 million with him. Emily covered her mouth again. "He is running," Adrian nodded. "Running before anyone can stop him, and taking his entire empire with him." Emily shook her head. "He will not go quietly." Adrian's voice dropped. "Which is why we need to move quickly." She looked at him then. Really looked. She saw not just the strategist or the billionaire, or the man who had protected her through the night. She saw someone who had chosen to stand between her and a monster without asking for anything in return. Her voice softened. "Why are you doing this?" Adrian looked down for a moment before answering. "Because no one helped her. The woman before. The woman he lost." Emily's heart ached for him, and he continued, "I will not make that mistake again. Not with you." The vulnerability in his voice struck her deeply. She leaned forward slightly, her hand hovering near his. "Adrian." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You do not have to carry this alone," she whispered. "Not this time." Something unspoken passed between them then. Something raw, something electric. But the moment was interrupted by the soft buzz of Adrian's direct line. He answered immediately. "Knight." A federal agent's voice crackled through. "Sir, we interrogated the intruders. They were hired by a private security firm tied to the Hale family. They had orders to retrieve the girl at any cost." Emily swallowed. Adrian asked, "Did they mention Trevor?" "Yes, sir," the agent said. "He is aware she survived, and he will not stop." Adrian ended the call and turned to Emily. His expression serious but steady. "This is escalating faster than I expected," she whispered. "So what now?" Adrian walked back to the table and tapped several commands. "First, we get you out of sight. Somewhere he cannot track you, somewhere off-grid." Emily's heart raced. "Where?" Adrian looked at her with a quiet promise in his eyes. "My cabin in Vermont. No digital footprint, no cameras, no roads nearby. You will be safe there." Emily hesitated. "But you?" Adrian stepped closer. "I am going with you." She felt her entire body soften with relief, but fear hovered at the edges. "He will follow." "Yes," Adrian said, "but we will be ready." She drew in a trembling breath. "What about the evidence?" Adrian reached for a small encrypted drive. "It is coming with us. I will finish the trace there. Then I will send it directly to a federal prosecutor who owes me a favor." Emily blinked. "You are really going to take him down?" Adrian did not hesitate. "No, we are." Emily's breath caught. "We?" He nodded. "You are the one he tried to silence. You deserve justice." She felt something inside her heal just a little, just enough, but a shadow crossed her face. "Adrian, yes. What if he reaches us first? Adrian stepped close enough for her to feel his warmth. "Then I will stand between you and whatever comes." Her voice cracked. "Why?" Adrian answered with a calm intensity that left her breathless. "Because somewhere between last night and this morning I stopped feeling nothing, and I started feeling everything." Emily stared at him, stunned, as dawn broke across the ocean, casting golden light through the windows. And for the first time, she realized she was not just fighting to survive. She was fighting for a future she never thought she would have again. The drive out of the Hamptons began before sunrise, with the sky still tinted a deep blue and streaks of fading storm clouds drifting like torn fabric across the horizon. Adrian guided Emily into the back seat of the black SUV, handing her a soft blanket and a bottle of water as he slid into the driver's seat. No security detail, no convoy, just them. That was the plan. Quiet, invisible, off-grid. The mansion had been compromised, so they needed to disappear before Trevor realized how close she had come to exposing everything. Emily sat curled under the blanket, watching Adrian's reflection in the rear-view mirror. He looked sharper than he had last night, more alert, every muscle held tight beneath the calm exterior. Yet beneath the vigilance was something else entirely, something she was only beginning to understand, something protective, something personal. They drove in silence until the coast faded and long stretches of forested road took its place. Emily finally spoke, her voice still fragile from everything that had happened. "How far is your cabin?" Adrian kept his eyes forward. "Far enough. No one finds it unless I want them to." She let out a slow breath of relief. "And you are sure no one can track us?" Adrian nodded once. "I disabled every traceable system in the vehicle. The plates are unregistered, the route is unmonitored, and I left false signals at 3 separate locations." Emily blinked. "You did all that this morning?" Adrian finally looked at her in the mirror, his eyes steady. "I told you I do not take chances with your safety." She lowered her gaze, unable to stop the warmth blooming in her chest. No one had ever protected her like this. Not with intention, not with fire, not with conviction. Hours passed. The landscape turned colder, and the trees turned dense, coated with frost. Vermont was close. The air smelled like pine, and winter touched every surface. When they finally left the main road and turned onto a narrow dirt path that wound between tall pines, Emily sat up straighter. "This is beautiful," she whispered. Adrian slowed the vehicle as snow began to fall in soft, drifting flakes. He glanced at her again. "It is quiet up here, peaceful." Emily smiled weakly. "I forgot what peace felt like." The cabin appeared through the trees like something carved out of solitude. A small structure with dark cedar walls, smoke rising from a chimney, and warm light glowing faintly behind frosted windows. Adrian parked beside it and stepped out first, scanning the trees with a sharp, calculating gaze. Then he opened Emily's door and offered his hand. She hesitated only a moment before placing her trembling fingers in his. His hand closed around hers, gently yet firmly grounding her. She stepped out, and the cold air hit her cheeks like a cleansing shock. The world here felt different, not threatening, not suffocating, open. Adrian led her up the wooden steps and pushed open the cabin door. A wave of warmth greeted them from the fireplace crackling inside. Emily inhaled deeply. It smelled like cedar smoke and something safe. Adrian helped her out of the blanket and took her damp shoes away to dry. "You should rest," he said quietly. "You have not slept properly in days." But Emily shook her head. I cannot sleep when he is still out there, when everything is still happening. Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. You are safe here. Her breath trembled. For how long? As long as it takes, he said, and longer if you want. Something about those words made her heart stutter. But before she could reply, Adrian turned toward the wooden desk beside the fireplace and powered up a portable secure terminal. The screen glowed soft gold in the cabin light, and lines of code filled the display almost instantly. Emily stepped closer, watching with awe. Does your mind ever rest? Never when the danger is this real, he answered. She wrapped her arms around herself as she watched him navigate through complex financial networks with ease. Your cabin is beautiful, she said softly. He paused. Thank you. She smiled slightly. Who built it? Adrian leaned back in his chair. I did. She blinked, surprised. You built this? He nodded. It was after I lost her. Emily hesitated, then whispered, the woman you told me about. Adrian stared at the terminal for a long moment. Yes, it was the only place I could breathe for a while. Emily lowered her eyes. I am sorry. He shook his head. Do not be. It was a long time ago. But the truth hung unspoken between them. Pain leaves marks, marks that shape, marks that stay. A sudden gust of wind rattled the cabin windows and Emily flinched. Adrian immediately stood and placed a comforting hand on her arm. It is just the wind. She nodded, but her heartbeat quickened anyway. He noticed. Emily, we are alone here. No one followed us. But she shook her head. I know, my body does not believe it yet. Adrian stepped closer until she looked up at him. His voice softened. Your body will learn. In time. Her breath caught. And until then, you do not have to face any of this alone. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her emotions. Thank you, Adrian, for everything. He held her gaze longer than he should have. You do not need to thank me. Emily hesitated, but this time she did not look away. You make me feel something I have not felt in a long time. Adrian's expression stilled. And what is that? Emily's voice trembled as she whispered, safe. His breath caught the smallest bit, a shift so subtle she would have missed it if she had not been watching him so closely. Then he stepped back abruptly, as if he needed distance to think. Sit by the fire, he said gently. I will finish the trace. Emily obeyed, lowering herself onto a thick rug near the flames. The warmth seeped into her skin, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel something soft, something hopeful. Adrian worked in silence, and she watched him from across the room, the firelight casting shadows across his face. He looked strong, controlled, untouchable. But every so often his eyes flicked toward her, as if to confirm she was still there, still breathing, still safe. Snow thickened outside. The world quieted, and Emily felt a strange peace settle over her, until the silence broke. Adrian. His head lifted instantly. Something is wrong, she whispered. Adrian moved quickly to her side, placing a steadying hand on her back. What is it? Emily pressed a shaking hand to her chest. I have this feeling, this heavy feeling. Adrian leaned closer. Tell me, her voice cracked. He will not stop, not until I am gone. Adrian cupped the back of her head gently. He will stop when I make him stop. That does not sound legal, she whispered with a small, broken laugh. Adrian's voice lowered to a dangerous calm. Justice rarely is. Emily met his eyes. You cannot fight everything alone? Adrian exhaled. I am not alone, not anymore. She felt her throat tighten with emotion. Before she could reply, a sudden alert chimed softly from Adrian's terminal. He crossed the room quickly and Emily followed. "What is it?" he asked, tightening the encryption feed. Adrian's expression shifted into something sharp and cold. "He found our trail." Emily froze. "What? How?" Adrian zoomed in on the data leak. A credit card transaction made miles back at a gas station. Emily's gasp shook the air. "But we did not pay." Adrian nodded. "We did not. But someone did, someone working for him. Someone passed through and flagged the area. He is closer than I thought." Emily clutched his arm, terrified. "Adrian, if he finds us." Adrian turned to her with absolute conviction in his voice. "Then we will not run. We will fight." She looked up, trembling. "Fight how?" Adrian stepped closer, his voice dropping into a fierce whisper. "Together." Emily felt her breath catch. "Together." Adrian nodded. "I will never let him take you." Her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something deeper, something she had not dared feel for anyone. And then for the first time since she ran, Emily whispered the words that changed everything. "I trust you." Adrian's eyes softened, and something inside him cracked open. Quietly, irreversibly, snow fell harder as the afternoon dimmed into a bruised gray twilight, the kind of cold that silenced the forest and froze breath midair. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly, and Emily sat wrapped in a wool blanket, while Adrian rechecked every lock, every window, every vulnerable point. She watched him pace with that same controlled intensity he always carried, but today something simmered beneath it, sharper, more urgent. Whatever he saw on the surveillance feed had changed him. Emily pressed a hand to her stomach as dread thickened her breath. Adrian paused by the window, studying the thickening snowfall. "If they try to track us tonight, visibility will be low. That gives us an edge." Emily stood slowly. "I do not want an edge. I want this to be over." Adrian turned to her eyes, deep and unreadable. "And it will be. Tonight." She stepped closer. "You think he will come. I know he will come. Trevor never loses control of anything, and he believes you belong to him." Emily's heart hammered painfully. "I do not." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I know, which is why this ends. Now." The wind howled outside, shaking the branches, and Emily flinched. Adrian crossed the room in 2 strides and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "Look at me." She lifted her gaze, and the firelight reflected in his eyes like something fierce and ancient waking inside him. "I will not let him take you. Not from here, not from me." Her breath caught, and her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. Adrian lowered his forehead to hers and whispered almost painfully, "I cannot lose you. Not after everything." For a moment it felt as if the world had stopped. Just them, just breathing, just the terrifying possibility of a future. But then the peace shattered. A metallic ping echoed from outside, faint but unmistakable. Adrian's head snapped toward the window, and his entire body went rigid. "What was that?" Emily whispered. Adrian grabbed her wrist and pulled her down behind the sofa just as another sound cracked through the silence. Footsteps, slow, crunching through snow. Many footsteps. Emily's heart stopped. Adrian's whisper was steady, but deadly calm. "They are here." She clutched the blanket around herself, shaking. "How did they find us so fast?" Adrian's voice dropped to a low growl. "Shadow hounds. They are trained to track without digital signals." Emily swallowed a terrified breath. "What do we do?" Adrian slid a small device from his pocket, a circular metal disc glowing faintly blue. "We stay alive." He placed the device on the wooden floor. It pinged softly and emitted a faint pulse. Motion detection, proximity map, real-time tracking. Emily watched the screen. 3 dots, then 5, then 7. Her breath hitched. Adrian, that is a lot of men. Adrian met her gaze. I know. The first gunshot shattered the window like an explosion of ice. Emily screamed as Adrian pushed her to the ground and shielded her with his body. Stay down. Do not move. She nodded frantically, burying her face in the floorboards as more gunfire tore through the cabin. Adrian crawled to the side table, grabbed the rifle hidden beneath, and returned to her side. They are surrounding the cabin, Emily whispered, shaking violently. Adrian touched her cheek, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. You survive tonight. You hear me. You survive. She grabbed his arm. You too. He hesitated. I will try. Then he pressed a kiss to her forehead with fierce urgency before pulling away and crouching near the broken window. Outside, the snowstorm intensified, making everything glow white and ghostly. Dark shapes moved between the trees. Adrian held his breath, aimed and fired. One shape fell. Another raced closer. More shots. Emily covered her ears as the battle erupted. The door rattled violently. They are trying to break in, she cried. Adrian fired again, hitting the doorframe and forcing the intruder back. Stay behind the stove, he yelled. She crawled frantically as splinters rained down around her. Suddenly the cabin went black. The electricity died. The fire flickered out. The wind screamed. Emily froze in darkness. Adrian, I am here, he whispered, his voice sharp with adrenaline. Stay low. The shadows outside shifted, and a beam of a flashlight slashed across the window. Emily's breath trembled. They will come in. They will kill us. Adrian crawled back to her, gripping her shoulders. They will have to get through me first, and that is not happening. She stared into his face, barely lit by snowfall, filtering through the broken window. His eyes blazed with something more dangerous than fear, determination, and something even deeper than that. Something terrifyingly close to love. A sudden explosion rocked the side of the cabin, sending debris flying. Emily screamed, and Adrian pulled her under him, shielding her from falling wood. The wall had been breached. Heavy boots stomped through the opening. Flashlights swept the room. Emily curled under Adrian, her breath breaking. Adrian raised the rifle, but two beams turned toward him, and gunshots blasted through the cabin. He rolled, dragging Emily with him as bullets hit the floor inches from her face. Then Trevor's voice sliced through the chaos. Emily, his tone was smooth, calm, mocking. You cannot hide forever, darling. Emily's blood ran cold. Adrian stiffened beside her. Trevor stepped into the faint moonlight, leaking through the broken window, expensive coat dusted with snow expression, twisted into a dark smile. I told you there is no running from me. Emily cried out. Trevor, stop, please. Trevor lifted his gun lazily. Come home, Emily. Do not make this messy. Adrian rose from the ground with a slow, lethal fury. She is not going anywhere with you. Trevor sneered. And you think you can stop me with your little hero act? You are one man, Adrian. I have 7. Adrian shifted into a fighting stance. Then you are 7 too few. Trevor raised his weapon just as 2 mercenaries charged through the cabin. Emily grabbed the nearest object, a heavy carved wooden log meant for the fire, and swung it wildly, slamming it into the head of the man closest to her. He collapsed instantly. Adrian used the split-second distraction to tackle Trevor, knocking the gun from his hand. They crashed into the timber floor, rolling struggling snow, blowing inside like a storm of white shards. Trevor slammed a fist into Adrian's ribs. Adrian retaliated, driving his elbow hard into Trevor's jaw. Emily scrambled to her feet, staggering backward as another mercenary lunged at her. Before he could reach her, the cabin door burst open with a thunderous crash. Federal agents stormed inside, yelling commands with rifles raised. "FBI, drop your weapons." Now Trevor froze blood, dripping from his lip, eyes wide with shock, as agents swarmed him, slamming him to the ground and cuffing him. Emily stood shaking uncontrollably, staring as the nightmare finally broke apart. Adrian stumbled to his feet, chest heaving. The agents pulled Trevor outside, reading him his rights as he screamed curses into the snow. Emily turned to Adrian and ran into his arms, sobbing against him. He held her tight, burying his face in her hair, whispering, I have you, you are safe now." The cabin creaked under the weight of the storm, but for the first time since she fled into the rain, Emily felt her body unclench. Adrian held her like she was the only real thing in the world. And maybe she was. They stayed like that until the agents returned and the wind quieted, leaving only the sound of Emily's heartbeat against Adrian's chest steady and alive. 6 months later, the world felt nothing like the storm that had nearly swallowed them whole. Spring sunlight spilled across the courtyard of the newly built Night Center for Survivors, a modern glass building rising in the heart of Manhattan, bustling with reporters, activists, donors, and survivors searching for a second chance. Emily stood in front of the tall windows, smoothing the soft cream dress she wore. As visitors filtered through the lobby, she still found it surreal to be here alive, safe, breathing freely in a life she once thought she would never see. She touched the badge clipped to her dress, Director of Outreach, feeling a quiet pride bloom in her chest. She had spent the last months building programs connecting survivors to legal teams housing therapists and emergency financial support. Every hour mattered. Every life mattered. And after everything she had endured, she finally felt she was not only surviving, but guiding others towards safety. Behind her, she heard footsteps she knew without needing to turn. Adrian approached, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal suit, his hair slightly messy in the way that made him look less like a billionaire and more like the man who had carried her through darkness with shaking hands and quiet strength. "You are avoiding the cameras," he murmured with a small, amused smile. Emily shrugged, glancing at the crowd. "I am still trying to get used to being a public person." "You will get used to it," he said, though his voice held a softness reserved only for her. "You have done more in 5 months than most nonprofits manage in 5 years." She laughed, shaking her head. "Only because you built everything around me." Adrian stepped closer, his gaze warm. "No, Emily, you built this. I only funded it." She looked away, trying to hide the flush rising in her cheeks. She thought she had grown comfortable around him, but something about today, the quiet joy, the sunlight, the meaning of what they were celebrating, made her emotions feel too close to the surface. "Are you nervous?" she asked, teasing. "You hate public events." Adrian exhaled, lifting one shoulder slightly. "I do, but this one is different, because of you." Her pulse fluttered. "Because of what we are trying to change." He corrected quietly, though his eyes told her he meant something more. A reporter's voice called from across the room. "Adrian, Emily, we are ready for the ribbon cutting." Emily looked up at him, searching his face. "Are you ready for this?" Adrian offered his arm. "As long as you walk with me." She threaded her hand through the crook of his elbow, and they stepped forward together. Cameras flashed and the crowd applauded as the two of them approached the ribbon. Emily's hands trembled slightly, but Adrian placed his free hand over hers, grounding her with a steady warmth that traveled up her arm and settled in her chest. A photographer called out, "Smile." Emily turned toward Adrian, the corners of her lips lifting almost involuntarily. He smiled back, and something in his expression softened in a way she had never seen in public. It felt like an unspoken promise, quietly carved between the two of them. They cut the ribbon together, and applause erupted, echoing off the glass walls. The ceremony continued with speeches from advocates and survivors, and while the crowd gathered to tour the center, Emily slipped out to the rooftop terrace, needing a moment of air. The New York skyline stretched around her buildings, glittering in the late afternoon sun. She wrapped her arms lightly around herself, feeling the breeze brush over her skin. Footsteps approached, and a familiar warmth settled behind her as Adrian stepped beside her. "You disappeared," he said softly. "I needed a moment. It is overwhelming." He leaned on the railing next to her. "You did well today." She laughed quietly. "I think I forgot my name halfway through the speech." "No, you were perfect," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. Emily turned to him, searching his eyes. "Adrian, can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you help me?" "Really? Not the public reason, not the legal reason. Why did you choose me that night?" Adrian's jaw flexed as if he had expected the question, but not the way she asked it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because the moment I saw you standing in my kitchen, shaking and terrified, and still trying to protect someone else from danger, I realized something I had never realized before." Emily swallowed. "And what was that?" Adrian met her gaze with an intensity that made the world fall away. "I realized I had been asleep for years, alive but not living, breathing but not feeling. Then you said those words, 'I am naked,' and suddenly everything inside me woke up. Everything I thought I had lost, everything I thought I could never feel again." Emily's breath hitched. Adrian took her hands, gently lifting them between them. "I never saw you coming, Emily. I never expected someone so strong, so bright, so impossibly brave, to collide with my life like that storm. And I did not expect her to change everything I believed about myself." His voice softened. "But you did." Her eyes burned with emotion. "Adrian." He stepped closer, cupping her cheek with one warm, steady hand. "You saved me," he whispered. "Not the other way around." She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. "And you gave me my life back. You gave me safety." Adrian brushed a strand of hair from her face, his thumb lingering gently along her cheek. "You were never meant to be afraid. You were meant to be seen and loved and stood beside." The rooftop fell into a warm hush as sunlight stretched across the terrace, casting a gold glow around them. Emily's voice trembled as she whispered the truth she had been too afraid to say for months. "I am not naked anymore, but somehow you still see everything." Adrian's breath caught, and a small disbelieving smile curved his lips. "That is because you are the only truth I have ever believed in." She exhaled shakily, and he lifted her chin with the gentlest touch. Then, with the city alive around them, her heart steady, and no shadows left to outrun, Adrian kissed her. A slow, tender, grounding kiss that tasted like survival and hope and beginnings. Emily melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest, as he gathered her closer, like he had been waiting 6 months to pull her into his arms without fear, without danger, without a storm hanging over them. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his and whispered, "Thank you for coming back for me." "You walked out of the darkness," he murmured. "I was just smart enough to follow you." She laughed softly, and he kissed her again under the warm orange glow of a city that had finally become theirs. For the first time since the night she ran barefoot through the rain, Emily felt not just safe, but certain. This was the love she never believed she would find, and the love Adrian never saw coming. They stood together as the sun dipped low, the sky turning pink and gold, a symbol of the storm they had survived and the life they were building. Together, forever beginning now. If you are still here listening to this story, then maybe something in Adrian and Emily's journey touched a place inside you, a place that remembers what it feels like to run through storms you never asked for, or to carry wounds you did not deserve, or to hope quietly for someone who will stand between you and the darkness and say you are safe, now you can breathe. And if their story made you feel even a little less alone, then I want to say thank you truly. Thank you for being here, for spending this time with me, for choosing to stay until the very last moment of their journey. Because stories like this are not just fiction, they are reminders that even when life feels heavy, even when the world feels unfair, there can still be a hand reaching toward you, a voice saying you matter, and a future waiting to be rewritten. If you felt your heart clench when Emily whispered that she was naked and terrified, if you felt something warm break open inside you when Adrian lifted her like she was the most important thing he had ever touched, if you rooted for them through every bullet, every lie, every betrayal, then go ahead and give this video a like because it helps the channel more than you know. And if you want more stories like this, stories about survivors, stories about impossible love stories about people who find each other in storms and choose each other even when the world tries to tear them apart, then make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell so you never miss the next chapter. I read every single comment you leave, so tell me where in the world you are listening from tonight. Tell me which moment of this story hit you the hardest. Was it when she ran barefoot through the rain with nothing left to lose? Was it when he carried her through the dark, holding her like she was the first human warmth he had felt in years? Was it when she stood up to the man who tried to break her and proved she was stronger than anything he ever imagined? Or was it that quiet rooftop confession when she whispered, "I am not naked anymore," and he finally understood he had fallen in love with the bravest woman he had ever known? And if there is a story you want me to write next, if you love billionaire romance, or Western romance, or mafia redemption, or love born from danger, just tell me in the comments. This channel is not just mine, it is ours. And your ideas are the heartbeat behind every video I create. I want you to feel seen, to feel held, to feel like every time you click on a new story, you are stepping into a world where love wins, where courage matters, and where healing is not just possible, but inevitable. So thank you for choosing to be here with me. Thank you for giving Adrian and Emily a place to live beyond the shadows that tried to destroy them. And thank you for letting me tell stories that remind us all that even in the darkest night, someone somewhere is ready to lift you into their arms and whisper you are safe now. You are not alone. You are loved. I cannot wait to see you in the next story. Until then, stay safe, stay warm, stay kind, and keep believing that the love you deserve is already on its way to you, right now in ways you cannot yet see.